hundreds of previously secret documents from the grand jury's inquiry into Michael Brown's death. The trove includes the transcript of an interview that Dorian Johnson, the friend who was with Brown when he was killed by an officer, that one that he had with the FBI days after the shooting. Now, that interview is consistent with others Johnson did, including testifying before the grand jury. In them, Johnson says Officer Darren Wilson grabbed Michael Brown, that Brown was shot while running away from Wilson, and that Brown's hands were up when he was shot. But while Johnson's story has been consistent, that's not always the case with other eyewitnesses.
Now, well, a lot of witnesses obviously do their best to tell the Ferguson grand jury what they remembered. It does appear that there were also some who may have simply lied. There's a story this morning on CNN.com that looks at specific parts of this testimony.
Yeah, CNN's Josh Leves is overseeing a team that's sifting through the thousands of pages of the document so far. What are you finding?
Well, some of these people admit it. Some of these people actually got up there in front of the grand jury and said, yeah, I lied. Or at partway through their testimony ended up saying, okay, I was lying to you before this. And as we've been piecing through this, we've been putting together a series of stories that we're going to start to release in the coming days. But I can tell you right now, the first one is out this morning. It's on CNN.com right now. And what we are looking at is a series of people who were brought forward to the Ferguson grand jury only so that it could be proven that they had no credibility, either because they were lying straight up or because their credibility was so severely damaged in other ways. The Ferguson grand jury sat through hours of testimony that was not helpful in trying to figure out what may or may not have happened. And let me give you all a couple examples here. We're going to start with witness number 35, who gave all these dramatic descriptions. These are people on both sides. This was someone who was very much from the pro-Michael Brown contingent. So he gave all these dramatic descriptions, and then a grand juror asks him at one point in his testimony, when it all starts to fall apart, the juror says, "Are you telling us that the only thing that's true about all of your statements before this is that you saw that police officer shoot him at point-blank range?" And he says yes. So he acknowledges everything he had said up to that point was totally false. Now, here's someone on the other side, someone who was very pro-Officer Wilson, has actually created a group to support him. She gives all these fantastic descriptions, and then it starts to fall apart until the prosecutor asks her, "Is it possible, do you think, that you just dreamed about this after it happened and it feels real to you, that you were up there?" And she says, "I never dreamed about it." But she's an example of someone who has no credibility, because by the time they've gotten to that point in her testimony, they've established that she's running a pro-Wilson group. She posted a racist rant on the day that it happened. There's no sign that her car was ever even there. She's on some kind of medication, and she has memory problems. So what we have found is a series of witnesses, not the majority, but people who were brought forward and factually were not helpful to any grand jurors in trying to figure out what could have happened.
Okay, so I have to ask you, why were some of these people brought into the grand jury? Was it just so the grand jury could say, listen, we covered all our bases?
That's quite possible. You know, I've been asking our legal teams about this. Why would you take hours of time for these people when it's clearly not helpful testimony in that respect?
Right.
So you have these two contingents. You have this one side, like Sunny Hostin, one of our legal analysts, who feel that they wanted to give a big, jumbled, confusing case to the grand jury, because if they did that, then there's a good chance that Wilson would be exonerated. But then there's another contingent that says that they knew that there would be a federal investigation, there would be all this scrutiny afterwards, there would be all these people looking into it, and they wanted to be able to say, we tossed everything at the grand jury, everything we heard, anything from anyone, we put it all out there. So, you know, there are these two different predominant theories as to why it happened, but what's not in doubt is that a lot of people, well, a series of people were brought in here that were either lying or just completely not believable.